The British fleet had 72 hours to evacuate 400,000 men from one destroyed port and 40 kilometers of open beach. The math was simple. One destroyer holds 900 soldiers, but takes 8 hours for one round trip. They could save 45,000 men. The other 355,000 were supposed to die. But they didn't, because someone changed the equation. The first variable in this equation was geometry. The Royal Navy's powerful destroyers had a draft of 4 meters, and the Dunkirk beaches were shallow. This meant the ships could not get closer than 2 or 3 kilometers from shore. They were useless. The second variable was the port. Dunkirk was the only deep-water harbor, a machine for loading men. But by May 27th, it was completely destroyed by Luftwaffe bombing. The port was burning. And the third variable was the enemy. Guderian's tanks had stopped just 15 kilometers from the beach. And in the sky was completely dominated by the Luftwaffe, turning the beach into a shooting gallery. The soldiers were trapped between a sea that could not take them and an army that was coming to destroy them. By military means, evacuation was impossible. The solution did not come from the battlefield. It came from underground. From the Dynamo room, Admiral Ramsay's bunker in Dover. Ramsay and his staff realized, if the big ships could not go to the soldiers, then the soldiers must go to the ships. But to do that, they needed a bridge. They didn't need battleships. They needed hundreds of boats with a draft of less than 1 meter. They needed civilians. But this was not the Dunkirk spirit. This was requisition. The call didn't go to volunteers. It went to the Ministry of Shipping. This was an order. The owners of fishing boats, pleasure yachts, and coal barges were not asked. They were ordered to turn over their vessels to the Royal Navy immediately. The orders went to everyone. One 66-year-old retired Commodore, a man who had survived the sinking of the Titanic, received the notice for his private pleasure yacht. He was ordered to hand it over to the Navy. He refused and sailed it to Dunkirk himself, along with his son. He was just one of hundreds. The little ships were not meant to sail soldiers to England. That is a myth. That would have been too long and inefficient. Their real job was far more mundane. They became the ferry system, the last-mile shuttles. This system operated at 2 key loading points. Point 1. The mole. This was the one remaining concrete jetty in the harbor. Destroyers could just get close enough to its end, but the mole was a narrow road of death. Thousands of men queued for hours, a perfect target for the Luftwaffe. But the mole was only for the minority. Point 2. The open beaches. Here, on 40 kilometers of open sand, was 90% of the army. And here, the ferry system hit the 100-meter problem. The water was too shallow for the boats, but too deep for exhausted men who drowned trying to reach them. The solution was improvisation. They built piers out of abandoned vehicles. Engineers drove trucks, carriers, and ambulances directly into the sea, nose to tail. This created makeshift jetties for soldiers to walk, not wade, to the little ships. The boat would take 20, 50, sometimes 100 men, double its capacity. Then it would motor 2 kilometers to the destroyer, unload the men, and immediately return to the beach. All night long, under fire. That 66-year-old veteran's yacht managed 5 of these trips. packing 130 men aboard. A single trawler might make 9 trips in one night. This wasn't poetry. This was brutal industrial logistics. Of the 693 little ships, 226 were sunk. The press called it the miracle of Dunkirk, but it wasn't a miracle. It was the convergence of 3 analytical factors. Factor 1, logistics, the ferry system and truck jetties we just discussed. Factor 2, the enemy's mistake, Hitler's infamous halt order on May 24th. The tanks stopped 15 kilometers from the beach. Why? Goering promised Hitler his Luftwaffe would annihilate the army from the air. He failed. This gave Britain 48 hours. Factor 3, the weather. On May 27th, a storm descended on the channel. It was terrible for the small boats, but it completely grounded the Luftwaffe. This gave another 18 hours of almost safe evacuation. The Dunkirk spirit, the volunteers, was real, but it joined a bureaucratic system that was already working. Operation Dynamo was over. The result was a paradox. It was a military defeat, but a logistical victory. Rescued 338,226 soldiers, the core of a future army. Lost everything. Nearly 2,500 artillery guns, 64,000 vehicles, 76,000 tons of ammunition. Britain had saved its personnel, but lost all its equipment. Churchill called it a miracle. Admiral Ramsay called it logistics. But the soldiers who stood chest deep in the water only remembered the hands that pulled them from the sea. For years later, these men would return. On D-Day. And this time, it was not an evacuation.